This is Gail Lunsford for the Hastings-on-Hudson Oral History Project. I am interviewing Mr. Andrew Kissel in my home at 18 Calumet Avenue in Hastings. I believe that's pronounced Kissel. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Kissel is a longtime resident of Hastings. Why don't we begin with you telling us about your early years here in Hastings, or the area. Where were you born and when were you born?
I was born 1918 in Yonkers, and the family moved to Hastings when I was 6 months old, and we moved to Washington Avenue, 8 Washington Avenue, and I don't recall how long we lived at 8 Washington Avenue, but somewhere, possibly when we were 6, 7 years old, we moved to 88 Railroad Avenue. That's what Southside Avenue was called at that time.
Right. Was your family from Yonkers, or where did they come from?
My mother was from Poland, and my father was from Russia. And apparently, my mother lived on the border between Russia and Poland, because I can't imagine how they met each other. And they came to this country and were married in this country, in the Russian church in Yonkers.
Oh, what was the name of that church?
The Holy Trinity Russian Orthodox Church.
Wonderful. Did they spoke Russian and Polish in the home then? Is that correct?
Yes, it was Russian. As I say, my mother was able to speak both because she was on the border apparently, so there was no problem.
Right. Did your home, was it a traditional Russian type home, or was it very much an Americanized home?
It was Americanized, what we could afford at that time. It wasn't a traditional European home.
Right.
It's what we could afford, and that was it.
How large was your family?
I had 2 brothers and a sister.
So was it a total of 4?
4.
That would be 4.
Four.
Right. You're the oldest, or?
I'm the oldest.
You're the oldest. Right. So you started to school then at Hastings?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
From Railroad Avenue?
No, from Washington Avenue.
Oh, that's okay.
We moved to Washington Avenue originally.
Okay. Where did you start to school?
At but it's now the Farragut School, and I was kind of big for my size, and I skipped kindergarten and started in 1st grade.
How old were you then?
5. You had to be 5 to be accepted in school.
Right.
But I was kind of a big kid, and
that's right.
They put me into the 1st grade, because I guess it would have been out of place with the smaller kids in the kindergarten.
Do you remember a lot about the school there?
It all depends on what you mean by a lot.
Why don't you tell us something about it?
Well, if you had something specific to ask me, I could tell you, but I don't know what you're looking for.
Were there a lot of kids in the grades, in the size of the room? Was it large?
It was, the classes were much larger than they presently are. We were in maybe 30 kids to a classroom, and later on in the elementary school, we had classes of 40.
That is large.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is large. And the kids, were they speaking a lot of, did they speak primarily English, or did they also speak a lot of the different languages?
English primarily.
Right.
As best they could, some. But I had no problem. I was able to communicate.
Right.
Our parents, when they went to registers, they had difficulty. That's why you get all kinds of mispronounced names. I mean, the parents couldn't pronounce the name like it is today. But the kids growing up, you have a lot of mispronounced names.
Right, right. The neighborhood down on Railroad Avenue, this was an apartment building you lived in, or
Yes.
in a house itself?
It's the big apartment that's on building, well, in the middle of Washington Avenue.
Right.
It's now, I think it's co-op now.
Mm-hmm.
A man bought it, and he modernized it. Except for the one family you probably heard, the 2 fellas that lived there that paid $27 a month rent.
I did hear about that. Could you describe what it looked like when you lived there?
Exactly like it is today. Except that he has put modern windows in. We had wooden sash windows,
Wooden sash windows.
and but now he's got, I guess, aluminum frame, storm windows and that sort of
So
thing.
that's about 6 stories tall, I believe. Is that right? About
At least that, I think.
Yeah.
At least that tall.
right.
And on the back side, there are no porches. There were porches on the back side on each floor, wooden porches.
Right.
And
Did you use those in the summer?
oh yes, because that was, in essence, was the fire escape, because there was no other way to get down if you had a fire.
Right.
So we always use those porches and stairs to get down to the yard, to play in the yard. What you would call a yard. It was just a dirt lot. That's all.
How many kids? A lot of kids in the building, I guess.
Quite a few, yes.
Right.
Well, almost all the adults who are adults now, half of them lived in that building. The other half lived in the building on the corner at, I guess it's 3 Washington Avenue, Selz's former building.
Mm-hmm.
So we all grew up together, all the kids, most of those kids you see in that picture that I gave you. But we were all about the same age.
Right.
And we grew up together.
So it's almost all of the kids who went to the high school with you. So it'd be
yeah.
like in that one street, a couple of hundred kids would all live on the
Yeah,
same street. What did your apartment look like?
We shared a bathroom with the apartment adjacent to us. We had a large kitchen, which served as a living room also, and I believe we had 2 bedrooms and a small living room. That was the extent of the building. In those days, it was gas. There was no electricity. All the lighting was in gas. I remember every once in a while we'd have to buy these mantles, they called them, the thing that got red hot from the gas and provided the light in the building.
Mm-hmm. And those, I'm sorry, you'll have to describe that again, the mantle.
It's the thing that on a gas light, the fixture was such that you put these mantles on it. It was a net type thing. It looked like a net, a little round thing that made of a net material. And the gas, when you lit it, the gas lit and it heated this mantle, what they called the mantle. And the mantle got so hot that provided the light.
That it would glow.
It would glow that strong that was the light.
Right. Why did your parents move from Yonkers to Hastings?
That I couldn't tell. That was too. I was
long.
too young
Yeah.
then that I would know anything like
Did
that.
did your father work in the area there, or what kind of work did he do?
He worked while we lived in Hastings. Yes, we lived there. Well, I lived there for 23 years before I moved out of there, and they both died there.
Right. What work did he do while
Whatever
was
he
there?
could get. He worked for the Alexander Smith Carpet Company in Yonkers. He worked on the railroad. He worked in Lord and Burnham's in Irvington. He worked for General Motors in Tarrytown. Wherever there was work, when one laid off, you went to someplace else and got to work.
Mm-hmm. Did he ever work in the factories that were on the waterfront here in Hastings?
I don't think he ever worked in Anaconda or the
Mhm.
American Press. I don't recall that.
Mm-hmm.
If he did.
Right.
If he did, I was too young to realize it.
Right. Did your mother work outside the home, or
She did domestic work.
she did domestic?
Domestic work.
Where did she work primarily?
In homes, private homes.
That's what in
privately-
Hastings?
In
or-
Hastings, yeah. There's no way there was no transportation. It's either public transportation if you could get to the job, but she worked in Hastings, walk.
Right. Do you remember any of the families that she worked for? Do you remember
The
Divines?
Divines is one. She worked for them for a long time. And there was another family, gosh, what's their name? Well, he was an architect, and I don't know what she was. They lived right next to the Riverview Manor firehouse. As a matter of fact, when my mother worked there, I went with her and I did handyman work on it. Cut grass, clipped the hedges, and whatever he told me to do for $1, that's what I did. I mean, I painted the interior of his house. Anything, we were glad to get that money.
What year is that we're talking?
That would have been in high school. In the 30s. In the 30s, yeah.
And when you went to the Hastings High School, and was it? I think you went from. Where did you go from Hastings High School? From there.
From high school, I went to Pratt.
Right.
Pratt in Brooklyn.
Was that unusual for someone in Hastings to go to college?
Very, very. Most parents didn't have the money. They tried to do the best they could. A lot of the girls were able to go to business school, and my brothers were offered to go. I don't know if my parents could have carried it out, but they were offered to go and they chose not to. They didn't choose to go to further their education.
Why did you choose to
go? For something better. Yeah, I saw what was happening to my parents, and I said, there's got to be something better, and it's got to be something easier, and that was their intent, to make it easier for myself or either my brothers or my sister. But none of them chose to go to further their education. They all graduated from high school. Mm-hmm. That was it.
Mm-hmm. The one story that I do want to make sure that we talk about is the boardings.
The working for the milkman. Yeah. And that was, what specifically, what do you want to start?
The story of in terms of the kind of job, I mean, in terms of you, the kind of job that you did have when you were growing up, the kind of jobs, and you say we did a lot of different things.
Well, that was one of the jobs, working for the milkman. It wasn't working for the Borden's milk company. It was working for the milkman himself. And the job consisted of getting up 2 o'clock in the morning and going out and delivering milk every day. And the compensation was a quart of chocolate milk every morning after we got done with the route. And at the end of the week, it was $2 towards the family milk bill.
Incredible. What year are we talking about?
Here again in the 30s, because it was while we were going to high school, from between the 9th and the 12th grade.
Right.
So, and then when you came, after you got done, it was imperative that all the milk was delivered by 7 o'clock in the morning. Everybody had their milk by 7 o'clock in the morning. And then when you got home, you lay down and got about maybe an hour's nap, and then you had to get up to go to school.
Yeah. What did your other brothers and sisters also do those kinds of jobs? Or because you were the oldest that it?
No, my other brother, the middle guy, we took turns. If one couldn't make it, the other guy got up and he filled the job.
Yeah.
It was just the two of us. It was myself and the next youngest guy.
Yeah. What was the? You were describing something about the neighborhood. What was the? Can you describe more of the neighborhood that was right along that railroad avenue? The people, was it primarily Russian and Polish that lived on railroad?
Primarily, yes. And the Hungarian people primarily lived on Maple Avenue. The Irish people lived on Lower Warburton. As a matter of fact, those buildings down there are called the Irish Flats. So they lived down there, and Ridge Street, Washington Avenue, Railroad Avenue was primarily the Slavish, the Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian people.
And did they, was there a lot of the mixture between the neighborhoods, or did the neighborhood
It was a mixed neighborhood. Everybody was everybody's friend. It didn't make any difference whether you were Russian and I was Polish or anything like that. It was just a melting pot of immigrants. And the kids, we all played with each other. It didn't make any difference what nationality you were.
Well, did you notice a lot of the animosity between or mixture between the people, what were called the hill people? And
there was that feeling. The manor, they used to call them the manor kids. And I don't know why they didn't mix too well, but there was no animosity. There was no fights or anything like that, gang fights amongst each other. It's just they kept to themselves and we kept to ourselves down on the lower portion of the village.
Did you notice it in school or anything?
No, there was no problems whatsoever.
Right.
Didn't make any difference.
What did you, when you, where your house was located, I believe, on Railroad.
Right on Railroad Avenue, the second place where
Right.
we lived, at
And-
88.
And you're looking, when you looked out the windows, you were looking at,
Hastings Pavement Company. And you could see a portion of what was then the Anaconda,
right,
and you had the North Mill and you had the South Mill,
and
the Anaconda.
did you go down to the river?
Oh yes, that was summertime. That was our life. We went swimming there. We went crabbing there. That was our life. Our parents went fishing down off the public dock. What I mentioned to you before. Went fishing.
Where was that public dock?
It was between the Hastings Pavement Company and the North Mill of the Anaconda.
And the dock began. How did you get out to the dock itself?
You went across the present bridge over the tracks, or you went over the bridge, the walk bridge, over off of Washington Avenue down to what used to be the main office of the Anaconda, and walk along River Street, what they still call, I guess, River Street, and then you walk down between the pavement company and the North Mill, and the dock was naturally on the riverfront.
And did only kids who were swimming go down there, or who went down there?
Primarily just for fishing and swimming. As a matter of fact, that's where most of the kids learned to swim off the dock, because the bigger guys, if you went down there, they just threw you in. It was a sink or swim situation. So naturally, they wouldn't let you drown, but when they saw that you were floundering, they would come and get you. But if you could flounder enough to get back to the dock, why, the next time you knew how to swim.
It was trial by error. So it was primarily off the dock that people would do the swimming. Did you have a boat?
No. We went down to the river, down to the Tower Yacht Club. The Tower Yacht Club, they used to call the beach, because it had a little sandy area, and then there was the first rock. And this is the way they designated the swimming spots, where it was deep at high tide, immediately deep, where you couldn't just walk in. You were able to dive, run off this rock and dive into the water. And then the next park was the point, and that used to be a grassy spot, or what would you call it, peninsula stuck out into the river, and you would go down and you'd be able to picnic there. It was a nice grassy spot, and it was a gradual, what would you call it there? You could walk in from shore,
Mm-hmm.
and we swam there, and then further down was what they called the second rock. And that again was for the better swimmers, where it was very deep. You immediately deep. You couldn't just wade out until you could swim.
Did you have a boat?
No. Well, yeah, have a boat. Not a boat per se. We used to make kayaks. Our homemade, the fellas would make them themselves. They would save enough of money and get the 2x2, what you call them, and then we would get the staves off of wooden barrels to make the ribs, and then we would steal tarpaulins for trucks or wherever you can get it to make the skin, and we covered those, and that was the extent of the boats.
Did you
that we
tarp it?
owned.
And then how did you make it waterproof with just a tarp?
Paint. Oh, you painted it. You put a 3 or 4, whatever color you could either steal or find down at the dump, and you just painted it 2 or 3 coats on there until it was waterproof. And they were heavy. And then this was all done in well, they didn't have what we now call basements. It was a cellar. You made these things in the cellar, and then you carried them down to the river. launched them, you know, in a shallow part of the river. And
Right.
some of the guys I never went across, and some of the guys went across the river in those darn things. I never did it. I was too chicken.
Did one person kayak or
One person. It was only individual. If there was, well, maybe we would have 2 or 3 fellas who would chip in, help make the thing, and then you would take turns paddling the thing. I mean, one guy would take a ride, he'd come back, and then his partner would go out and come back, and then they would take turns using the kayak.
That's a pretty swift river sometimes. Kayak.
No, it's never that. Nobody ever drowned. Never.
Did you use it in the winter? Did you skate in it?
Skate, if somebody was able to find a discarded pair of skates, yeah, we skate a little bit. But in the wintertime, the fun was running on what we call rubber ice. We went down between what is now Robeson's and the North Mill, and the ice would break up in cakes, and we would run from cake to cake and hope that you didn't fall in. And many a time and many a guy fell in, and then you'd have to build a fire. You didn't dare go home. Build a fire down there and dry yourself off. That was the extent of the winter fun down there. But if somebody was fortunate enough to find an old, we couldn't afford any ice skates. Then there was, before it broke, when the tide changes, it used to break up the ice. But before it changed, it would, you know, pretty good piece of ice there to skate on. So they did skate on that.
Right. That's I just wondered whether did they ever use the sugar pond?
Yes, we used to skate on the sugar pond. But the sugar, what we called the sugar pond then was the one down underneath the bridge. That's the sugar pond. That was the original sugar pond. And how I was surprised when they started calling this pond up here the sugar pond. The original sugar pond was down underneath the bridge.
Where the dump is.
Well, no, there's no dump down.
Oh, you
It
mean down
went down underneath the Warburton Avenue Bridge, that pond there, where that's in that Cropsey estate now. That lady that bought the thing, that used to be the original sugar. We used to sing there. We used to skate there,
Right.
and that froze solid. There was no problem.
Right. And then they relocated it. That's but it was family, and was it just kids or was
It was just the kids,
What did the adults do during when you were skating? What were the adults doing?
Oh, they were home doing whatever was necessary at home. Our parents never had any recreation. It was always the kids. I mean, we had to find our own recreation.
Right. Were you home in the evenings, or did you? What time did you usually get home in the evening? Around?
We had to be home at 9 p.m. They talk about these whistles at this last meeting that I was at, and to us, that 9 p.m. whistle was our curfew. The kids on Railroad, Washington Avenue, that was our curfew. God forbid you weren't in the house when that whistle stopped blowing. So what the original intent of that whistle was, I don't know. But that was our curfew for the kids down in our neighborhood. That was our curfew.
Right. Did you, there was some athletic teams in Hastings. Did you
yes.
go around kids?
Well, when we were kids, the recreation department sponsored a baseball league in the summertime. In the wintertime, they sponsored basketball. We played in the gym, the school gym on Saturday mornings. And then the Rotary Club sponsored a Rotary League, which we played Children's Village, Ardsley, and Dobbs Ferry. And we had several teams in Hastings. Mm-hmm. So that was the extent of our recreation in our youth. Mm-hmm. And then again, we when we were playing something organized, where the plaza is today, that was a big dirt field. We used to play baseball there ourselves then, when there was no organized baseball or basketball schedule. We would, the equipment, we couldn't afford it. What we used to get is the discarded gloves that the semi-professional teams, the Lyceum, St. Matthew's Lyceum, or we would go up to the Sunday games when they played, the semi-pro teams played on Sunday, and they would break a bat, and the kids would run like crazy for that bat. We would take it, and then we would repair it with tape, nails, or whatever, and tape, and that was our bats. And baseballs, whenever they hit a foul ball on Sunday, the semi-pros, the kids would all run up into the woods there where it was hit, and they would step on the ball, and then they couldn't find it. So then after the game was over, we went back and got the ball, and then we played with that ball until we knocked the cover off. And actually, I mean, no grass or nothing, we just played in dirt. That cover didn't last at all. So after the cover was knocked off, then we would wrap it in friction tape, which we got from the Con Edison people when they were around repairing the wires and stuff like that. And we would befriend the workers, and they would every once in a while give us a whole roll of friction tape, and that ball weighed about 3 or 4 pounds. But
as much as your kayak.
Yeah, and we would play with that ball and until you knocked that cover off, and then the yarn started to come off. So that's the equipment we had. Or basketball in the summertime, we used to play we put up our own basket underneath the bridge, and Coach Cochran, the high school coach at that time, would give us basketballs that were already out of shape and stuff like that. So we would play basketball all day long in the summertime, and then go down a river, take a swim, or go down and crab, and catch the crabs, and then boil them right there. There used to be it's still part of it there. They call it the junk boat. I don't know why they put that boat in there. I guess they were going to fill it in. It's between the North Mill and the present Robeson. And right now the tennis club is on it. And that was the favorite place to swim and crab. And we made our own diving board. The driftwood we would look for a good plank come down, and then we fixed it up so it was a springboard down off the dock there. And then, like I said, we would crab, and that was our day, all day long.
And the crab you ate right there.
We got an old pot and just used the river water, and you boil them right there, and had a little lunch, if you want to call it that.
Did you ever do that to take it home, or only for that?
Oh, the crab! Oh, yeah, we took them home too. But this was just extra. I mean, to kill more time.
Right.
You couldn't eat all you caught because in those days the crabs ran real good. In a couple hours, you can get a bushel basket of crabs. As a matter of fact, some if they needed money, they needed money all the time. But they would go and sell those crabs.
The children did?
Yeah, the kids. Yeah, well, the parents never went crabbing. Right. The parents went fishing in the wintertime. And like I said, it was off the public dock. And the myth was that the fishing was best at night, and the Tommy cods ran best in the wintertime. So the fathers, they made their own nets, and then they went to the fish store and got shrimp and baited the net, and they took their kerosene lamps, and they would go down on the public dock at night and throw the nets in, and they'd get a couple hours, they would get a whole rag bag full of tiny cod and take it home, and then the father would not skin them, they would clean them and have fish the next day. And the Tommy cod was, I guess, a species of a codfish. At least that's what it tasted and looked like, except it was very small. Mm-hmm. And it was real cold. The line for the net, when you pulled it up, it froze. It was ice. It was during the wintertime, and the line would freeze. And it was all, and then everybody had their little fire down there, so that after their hands got cold, pulling the net, then they'd go by the fire and warm up.
When you were crabbing, the kids would sell the
yeah,
crab.
Where
would they sell them? Where would they sell them?
Some stores used to buy them.
Some stores.
Yeah, it wasn't a wholesale thing. Yeah. Restaurants, not restaurants, the gin mills would buy them. It wasn't a commercial venture. It was just you got a quarter for a bag full.
Where were the gin mills?
Well, you had on Washington Avenue, there was 1, 2, 3, 4 on Washington Avenue.
During Prohibition?
No, this was Prohibition. This was legit. Prohibition, you couldn't have gin mills. Yeah. During Prohibition, they made their own. They did. The people used to make their own.
Really? Did you make your own gin at home?
My parents did it, yes.
What flavor did they make?
It wasn't flavored. What they would do is get the prunes and fruit and stale bread, rye bread and stuff, and let it ferment.
Here we go. Okay.
So
You were describing the kind of whiskey that was made in some of the homes that you knew about in Hastings.
well, as I mentioned previously, they used prunes and fruit, overripe fruit and stale bread, and they would let it ferment, and then they would put the juice in the still, and let me see
What did the still look like?
it was a copper vessel, and inside was a copper coil, and they would put the fermented juice or whatever you want to call it into the copper kettle, and naturally you put water in around the coils, and as the juice boiled and it turned to steam, it would go through the coil, and then the cold water would condense the thing, and it would just keep dripping out with 150 proof alcohol. So the way they tested it, they would take a little bit and put it on a wooden board and light it, and if it burned blue, that was good. Then now you ask about flavor. The way they flavored it, they would burn sugar and then use that as a flavoring and coloring, so it looked like real whiskey.
Did different families have different kinds?
No, there was only one kind. It was just alcohol. What came out of the still was pure alcohol.
Yeah.
And like I say, they all learned to make it the same way, and it was basically the same thing. Every family was the same. Oh, I remember we used to make root beer, homemade root beer. And we had a capping machine and stuff like that. So they did all that for survival. I mean, whatever was that they could afford, that was it.
What did they use to make the root beer?
You were able to buy some kind of a flavoring or something, and then you had yeast, and you let it set, and then they would fill these bottles, and you were able to buy the caps, and there was a capping thing that you put the caps on, and then you pushed it down, and it sealed the bottle. So then you would let it stand for a bit. I don't know like I said, I don't know what the recipe was for it, but there was some kind of a root beer flavoring, and then they would put it down in the cellar, and we would drink it. Beer. Some people made beer. My family never made beer. Some people used to make their own brew too. I don't know how they made that.
You were describing some of the fishing and other things that took place off of the dock, the public dock
right.
that was down there.
Right.
Did you notice that the water something that was it fairly clean water at that time, or was it?
Definitely not. Today the water is much cleaner, and yet they complain. Well, chemically, I don't know about chemically, but it didn't affect the life in the river, because the crabs ran like crazy, and fish was plentiful in those days. And then in recent years here, you got all kinds of PCBs and what have you, and if they were there, it didn't affect anybody in our day.
So what was in it? Was it the wood or what have you was in that was in the river that you said?
Sewage. They never had sewage treatment plants. That sewage, raw sewage. As a matter of fact, one of the outlets was right at the public dock, one of the pipes, and it emptied right there. You could see when it emptied right into the river.
So what you were diving into was the sewage from Hastings.
Yes, we swam in it. We would have to, even when we went down to what we used to call the point or the beach down by the Tower Yacht Club, at a certain tide, you would have to park this thing to go out where it was clean to swim. So it was a mess then, and we talk about it now, about everybody complaining about how dirty that. We all swam in worse than they would ever have seen it, and it didn't affect any one of us.
Did they ever have typhoid in Hastings?
Not that I know of. I'll tell you what, there was where the plaza is now, there was a creek. There was a bunch of garages there, and right beside the garages was a creek. And this was before the plaza. And we would play baseball there in that dirt lot and get thirsty, and we'd go and drink that water out of that creek this way. And it never affected anybody.
Just out of your hand?
Well, we, scoop it where it was, there was a puddle, and you would drink it. And it didn't affect anybody, which is very amazing. I can't understand it. I mean, they complain now about dirty water and ecology and stuff like that, and yet here we are, 70 years later.
It's amazing. Did I'm trying to think of you were describing some of the things in terms of the school that you were, in terms of the kids, all of the kids. Did most of the kids in your neighborhood go to school?
They all went to school. The athletic teams were primarily the village kids. Why? Well, maybe I could explain it, because in our spare time, that's all we ever did. We played baseball in the dirt lot, and we played basketball in a makeshift basket, stuff like that. So the kids call it talent, a little more talent, whereas the kids from the manor, quotes, they didn't do that. They were the ones that made it from the manor was because of their size. I mean, some of them were tall, but that didn't make any difference. I mean, they were on the same teams, but the predominance was kids from the village on the athletic teams in the high school.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Did in the school itself, what were some of the courses that you studied there? What was
Well, most of the village kids were gosh, what do they call it? The girls were secretarial. The industrial arts, that consisted mostly of shop courses. Most of the fellas took industrial arts. As a matter of fact, I started out with. When I got done, I had a choice of four diplomas in high school. But then when my father asked me if I wanted to go to college, then the last year I had to take algebra, geometry, and college entrance courses. But most of the fellas took industrial arts, and the girls took secretarial.
Did either one of your parents go to high school and college?
No. Maybe my father got some kind of higher education in Russia. I don't know. Not in this country, though. My father was very fluent in Russian. Speak it, write it, read it. My mother, the ladies were very, very, what's the word I want to use? They couldn't read nor write or anything, even in their own tongue. They were very uneducated, if you want to use that word. Mm-hmm. But the men, most of the men were educated, mostly from the other side. European.
And did you study Russian and Polish?
Russian. Our parents insisted that we took Russian. They hired a tutor from the city. He would come up every Saturday, and every Saturday morning was Russian school. And almost all the children of my age went to Russian school. My younger brother and sister, by the time they got old enough, it was all gone. They stopped that. The parents were gone, and there was nobody to, and the interest wasn't there. The kids, after a while, they got smarter. No way, I'm not going to Russian school. But I'm not sorry that I went. There's only very few of us of my age, of my time, that are still alive and are able to. Some of them, like my wife, She can read it, she could write it, but she can't speak it. See, she understands it, and there are several others the same way, but there's very few of us that they can read, write, and understand, and speak the language.
Where did they hold the classes?
In those days, all the people in the neighborhood, they formed a fraternal society, and the headquarters were in New York, and I don't know, the ROVA, R-O-O-V-A in English is the interpretation. I forgot what that stands for. And they had club rooms that they rented. I mean, Sigaritsky's Hall was one. They used to have a club room down where the plaza presently is, across from the station, which is no more. There used to be a factory lane, a street there, and there was a club room that they had there, and there was a butcher shop there, and there was a house there. That was all cleaned out of there, and that's what we had in those. The classes were held in those club rooms. Those people.
How many people? And you're in the for instance, the class you were in. How many people?
It wasn't by grades. It was everybody. I mean, everybody from 10 to whatever, whoever wanted to go. 15, 20 in the group.
Did any of the adults also study English?
Not formally. Not formally. What they learned that they picked up from talking to the English speaking people. Mm-hmm. For instance, my mother, I mean, she couldn't talk English worth a damn, but she picked up by doing this domestic work because she worked for, the American people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When did your parents pass on?
Oh gosh, I don't know the dates now. My mother died very young. She was only 47. She had cancer. At that time, they didn't know what cancer was. But as years went by, we realized that it was cancer. My father, he died. He must have been 90-some years old, and he died of a stroke.
Mm. Here in Hastings.
They lived all their lives in Hastings. Mm-hmm. And I lived, like I say, I moved out of here in 41, and my brother, the second youngest guy, he lived in Hastings all his life. He died of cancer. And the next brother, he lived until he got married, and then he moved to Dobbs Ferry. And when my sister got married, she moved to Yonkers. And after they moved, they never came back here.
Why did you come back?
Well, everybody we knew was here. All our friends, the people we grew up with, and that's all I ever heard from my wife, because, as I said, working for the railroad, we lived in Albany, we lived in Syracuse, we lived in Buffalo, and she kept harping, when you going to get a job in New York? So the first time there was an opening in New York, I accepted the job and came down to New York.
Would it be fair to ask what you see as some of the biggest changes in Hastings from the 1940s until now?
In what respect? Physically, or?
Yeah, physically. I think that's the thing that I was thinking of. Has it changed?
Basically, no. Other than the fact that they built the plaza from my day, they built the plaza, which they had to demolish some buildings. And that was the biggest change that I could remember. Physical change. All the rest of the village is the same. Well, they built a couple of parking plazas in the village and stuff like that, but basically, most of the buildings still stand, and I can't think of anything really outstanding that changed.
Did a lot of kids think in terms of moving from Hastings as they grew up? I mean, when you were kids, did you think in terms of leaving Hastings?
Not deliberately thinking about moving out. It's circumstances dictated. Mm-hmm. I mean, for instance, in my case, mm-hmm. if I wanted to work, I had to move out of Hastings. It wasn't a job. that I could hold. So
In terms of, who was your best friend when you were growing up?
we were still best friends. We're still alive. We all palled together. The Busy Bees, the Senior Citizens Group, they all belonged to that, and we're all still friends.
Where did they work?
Let's see. Most of them worked in the Anaconda, the fellas. And my wife worked in the city, and secretarial work. That's basically it.
Did you get married while you were still in Hastings, or?
Yes, yeah. I got graduated in 40, and I got married in 41, and moved on. As a matter of fact, I was working in Albany for a year while I was still courting my wife.
Really?
When we made enough of money, we got married, and then I had to go up there. And we went up there to live permanently because I used to come down and see her from Albany. For one evening. We used to take the evening train out of Albany and take, I think it was a midnight train, back to Albany, and get back to Albany at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then go to work the next morning.
Right.
But naturally, it wasn't physical work. It was what we were on test. We were testing locomotives then.
Right. Did in terms of the early years in your neighborhood, most of the kids going to the Hastings High School, but a lot of those then went into Anaconda from there.
They went to work there. Yeah. Those that couldn't afford or didn't want to further their education, Anaconda was their hope, only hope.
Did your parents, they stayed forever at 88 Railroad, or did they buy a house, or did they?
We lived in that apartment. My father died out of there.
Right. And so rather than buying a house, the kids went to college instead. That was kind of a...
Very few. That wasn't. I don't think that was a criteria. It's just that it was a matter of economics. Mm-hmm. I mean, they just couldn't make enough of money to buy a house at what they could afford. It wasn't a matter of either house or school. School, as a matter of fact, was, I think, a priority. If they could afford it, they wanted their kids to go to school. Mm-hmm. My wife went to secretarial school. All her sisters went to secretarial school.
Did a lot of parents put emphasis on education? Was that an exception for your parents to put that much emphasis on it?
No, that was almost a rule with all those people down there. They wanted better for their children, and each family offered their kids a chance to go to school, some higher education, and some chose, some didn't.
Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of emphasis from the school, or did teachers support that kind of going through the colleges?
Well, there wasn't that kind of. What do you mean? In school they emphasized not really. I mean, they didn't push it. I mean, if you wanted to go to school, you went to the counselor, and she would help you to go to school. But there was no emphasis on you gotta go to college or further your education.
Right. But there was in the school itself, there was a lot of people. There was the industrial arts section.
Yeah, industrial arts, right.
Right, and then did some boys take different kinds of courses than the industrial arts, or was it?
Well, primarily, here again, the division between the manor and the village, primarily the manor kids took the college entrance course. Mm-hmm. And our kids, knowing that they probably won't be able to go to a higher education, they took the industrial arts. Mm-hmm. And the girls took the secretarial or homemaking courses. Mm-hmm. But the college entrance course was predominantly what they used to call the manor kids. Mm-hmm. Because supposedly the people in the manor were more affluent than the village people. So I guess the trend was there.
How did you see Hastings when you were growing up? How is it, the different neighborhoods. I think you named some of them around the Irish Flats.
And the Hungarians were on Maple Avenue.
Right. And then the area going out towards what's now the sawmill.
I don't know. We weren't allowed to go that far. I don't know what happened when we were kids. We weren't allowed to go up in there. We never knew, what was taking place out there.
Right. This was just the strip down by the...
We were restricted, as kids, we were restricted to Washington Avenue, Ridge Street, and Railroad Avenue, period, until we got close to high school age. Then we were able to go a little further. But when we were children, we didn't dare venture away from it. When your mother and father went to work, you stay around the house. Don't you go anywhere else. And that's the way it was.
Did you have other relatives besides your mother and father that lived in the area?
No.
That was it. Just
not relatives, friends.
Right.
I mean, these people have joined this social club, and that was the extent. Everybody was really almost like relatives there. Right. Real close.
Right. You were describing the incident around the delivering the milk in the...
Oh, you mean at the freight house, scrounging for the coke.
Right.
Well, survival was the main thing, and money was scarce, so you went wherever you could and get what you could for the least amount. There used to be a freight house down on Lower Railroad Avenue, and naturally in those days, the switching was done by steam locomotives. They switched the Zinzers, and they switched the Anaconda, they switched out the freight house, and every noontime, the steam switcher would come in to the yard by the freight house to clean its fire. And that's shake out the burned out coal and rebuild the fire with fresh coal. And he would come in there and take on water. There used to be a water plug there because you can't run the steam locomotive without water. And he would come in and take on water and clean his fire. And every noontime, all the mothers, well, I shouldn't say all, most of the mothers would go down and wait for that steam switcher to come in to clean his fire. And he would come in and dump the fire. Then he would move ahead, and there would be all these ladies, like a bunch of hornets, waiting for him to pull off the hot ash pile there. And they had their burlap bags and their hooks, and the minute he got off the pile, these women would, like hornets on that pile to get the coke. That's unburnt soft coal, and because there was still some heat left in that coal, and they would all fight for what they can get of the coal, and in red hot, just to rake away the red hot coals, and that coke was hot. They were very deft, very quickly pick up the good coke and throw it in their burlap bag. It wasn't red, but it was still hot. So that was a everyday ritual for the coal and coke. And if you had a good crew, the fireman on the switcher would feel sorry for these poor women, and he would get up on the coal tender and knock off some of the good soft coal. And they would be very grateful for that. and the men, for wood, we would go down, the oldest of the boys would go with the father down to the river for driftwood, big logs. And they had double-ended saws. They would take the double-ended saw, and if there was a big tree that floated in, they had homemade wagons that they made out of discarded wheelbarrow wheels. And they would cut the tree in half so it would fit on the wagon, and then all along the gravel along the tracks, and you would just really almost kill yourself pushing that log up to the house. And also they would go down and get the discarded ties when they were renewed ties in the village, going through the village of Hastings, and they would go down and get those ties. Then when we had enough, you couldn't store enough of the bulk stuff. Then Saturdays used to be time for cutting up these things in stove lengths. And I remember myself being the oldest, and my father on his double-ended saw just saw those ties and those trees into stove length, about a foot long pieces, and then chop them up and then carry them down into the cellar and stack them up in your own little bin. They had the separations, little storage bins, and stack it up there. And that was to help the coal supply. And those ties, they burned real hot because they were creosote.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, so well, that was life in those days.
That's did you shop for the food, or did you have a garden, or you may not have had a space?
Yes, we had chickens, and on 88 Southside Avenue, we had a chicken coop up in the back. 6 chickens, not a big thing, and naturally we had eggs from them. And when the chicken was done laying eggs, when it laid no more, then we killed it to eat. And then we go down to Yonkers, Chicken Island, and buy another chicken, and just keep the chickens going. And we had eggs and chicken all the time.
Did you have a garden at all, or just?
No, we didn't. Some people did have their own gardens, but we didn't have any room for it. Of course, this was, matter of fact, I don't know whose property it was, but nobody said anything in those days. And the chicken coop was homemade. We made it ourselves, the kids.
Right.
And then we used to, walk all the way up to Dobbs Ferry and buy feed, a 100-pound bag of feed. And I'll tell you, we used to go up, how crazy we were. We would get a raft, find a raft on the river, and a stick, and raft our way up to Dobbs Ferry, right down by the station. There used to be a feed company there. And we would get the 100-pound bag of feed and then come back down to Hastings.
On the raft?
Oh, yeah. It was along the shore, not just close to shore as possible. You couldn't go out very far. Of course, you had to be where the depth where you can reach with a stick to propel yourself.
Right. Did you carry it back sometimes, or always?
Yes, when you didn't have a raft, you had to carry it back. Took turns.
100 pounds. Incredible. When you and your brothers were doing things like that, do you remember what they were doing?
She was too young.
She was much younger.
Yeah, she was much younger.
When she had jobs around the house, when it was her turn to have jobs, do you know what the kind of things that she did?
Same thing that anybody does today, whatever had to be done was done.
In the house, she would actually do that.
And in talking about the apartments and stuff like that, on Southside Avenue, there was only 2 bedrooms, a living room and a large kitchen, what they call the eat-in kitchen now, and 6 people lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. My sister slept on the Davenport in the living room, and my mother and father had one of the bedrooms, and us 3 guys had a bed and a cot, 3 in the room. And when it came to showers, there was no such thing, or a bathtub. We used to go down to Yonkers, a public bathhouse.
The one on Yonkers Avenue.
Yonkers Avenue is one, yeah. Linden Street. We used to go to one on Yonkers Avenue.
Right.
So.
How often would you go down there?
Every week. Once a week only. You get on that trolley car once a week. You couldn't go every day.
Oh,
no way.
That's what so everyone in Hastings would, or a lot of people would.
I'm not going to speak for anybody else. This is what we did. Maybe they didn't go at all. I don't know. This is what we did.
Right. The public bathhouse. And you would, with the apartment across as you shared the bathroom?
Not on Southside Avenue. Each apartment had its own bathroom. This was on Washington Avenue, a big building.
Oh, on Washington Avenue, you had
You had a bathroom in between 2 apartments. And when
right.
somebody from the other one was in there, they put the hook on your door, and vice versa.
Right.
But on Southside Avenue, on Railroad Avenue, each apartment had just a toilet. That's what it was.
Did your family travel down into the city a lot, or did it ever go down into the city? It was only Hastings they stayed in?
Hastings, Yonkers, and
Yeah.
Yonkers.
Right.
Yonkers was the big shopping place. If they need anything big, clothes, shoes, and stuff like that, they would go to Yonkers.
And in the shopping for the food, since you did not have your own garden, that would be...
It was done locally there. They had